Welcome to Happy Talks with Dr. Alice and Donovan. Dr. Alice Fong is a holistic naturopathic doctor and founder of Amour de Soi Wellness, and Donovon Jenson is a software engineer and founder of HowToHappy.com. Together, they're out to cause more happiness in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Happy Talks. My name is Dr. Alice, and this is my awesome co-host, Donovan. And today we are talking about social class and happiness. So, Donovan, what are your initial thoughts when it comes to social class and happiness?
Yeah, the first thing that comes to mind is sort of differences in being able to have like freedom and flexibility, sort of like this ability to have more control over sort of some of your life experiences and things like that.
Yeah.
And I would say in general, as you have like more control and more ability to sort of maneuver within your life, you have the ability to influence your happiness positively. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to do the things that make it so that you're more likely to be happy, but you have more of an ability to do that. The other thing that sort of came to mind for me when thinking about this is that sort of like the way that people relate to each other, right? So like sort of having more comparisons where you feel like you are below someone else or less than someone else can have a really big impact on people's well-being and happiness, but that's a very internally dictated factor, which is to say that like it's only important to you if you make it important to yourself.
Right.
The world doesn't necessarily force that upon you.
Mm-hmm.
Those are some of my initial thoughts. I'm curious what's going on your side.
Yeah, my initial thought was just related back to my own personal experience in that I've pretty much stayed in the same class my whole life. I mean, maybe varies to a degree, but I would, maybe classify myself as middle class since I was a child, and I still feel like I am that. Don't feel like I'm upper class by any means. But yeah, never had to live in poverty either. So I feel fortunate for that sake. But I know my own happiness has evolved just through my own personal development that I've worked on. So I know it can change within the same class. But looking at social class, I think of my parents who were immigrants and basically came with nothing essentially, and came from a place where they had well, at least on my dad's side, they had nothing. They had to like leave their country. Like I hear stories from my dad of having to like walk from like Cambodia to Vietnam with just some bicycles and all his possessions, literally. And so in those types of situations where you're basically everything that you own is like literally on your back, I think it's like you're not really thinking about happiness at that point in your life when it's that extreme. You're just thinking about survival. And we've talked about this before of like, if you're in a lower class, then, survival is like your top priority, obviously. And happiness has to come secondary to survival. But yeah, once you meet like comfortable living standards, then I think happiness can become a bigger focus.
Yeah, as you're talking about that, I sort of was thinking, I feel like, like having met a bunch of different people from different social standings, or like,
Yeah.
I guess we should probably call this like socioeconomic standings, because that's probably a more
Yeah.
accurate term for like what we're talking about. But, it almost seems like happiness is, many more factors of happiness are involved in other parts of their life besides socioeconomic standing, right? And like, I've known many people who are not well off financially, but who are very happy because
Yeah.
what they're focusing on and what they're experiencing relatively for them is awesome. In terms of like, I've seen people sort of go from like minimum wage to barely above minimum wage and be extremely excited and feeling good and awesome, and in a way that sort of has sort of a longer lasting effect, right? Like not a super temporary thing, because they're getting like the resources they need to sort of like we talked about unlock some of those like really baseline things that like food, shelter, like some things that can really stress people out if you don't have it. In the same way, I've had like I've seen other people who are well off become more well off and have almost no impact on their happiness or well-being at all because they're not finding ways to use sort of that increased position or like money or whatever else it is to do
Right.
anything like meaningful or to increase happiness for themselves. So one of the things that came to mind for me, I'd be curious how it lands for you, is like I do think this sort of like the socioeconomic class that you're raised in has a big impact on happiness in terms of the mindsets you are most likely to carry forward without having done any work.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think at least with the mindsets. And I think that's evolved in my own family. I think in my childhood, because my parents like came from nothing, they lived in this like scarcity mindset. So they were like huge savers. They never went out. Like we would never eat out ever, ever. That was like a very rare occasion. Maybe if we were on vacation, well, we might eat out, but probably even then when we're on vacation, it was like camping and we're still going to cook our own food camping wise. So that has definitely shifted. I think we're still try to be conservative with our finances and save. But I think I've learned to kind of balance it with, hey, it's okay to enjoy life too. And it's like, I don't want to wait till I'm, retired to enjoy life. I want to enjoy it now, but I don't want to blow all my savings too. I want to, have future goals to work towards. So it's kind of changes. Yeah, I definitely eat out a lot more compared to when I was a kid, probably once or twice a week, but not excessively. I don't think I swung so hard the other way. So that's my own experience.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example of what I was trying to get at, which is like, if you don't have money growing up, it's very
Yeah.
easy to be in a scarcity mindset or have that like impressed upon you and then carry it forward with you in
Mhm.
a way that can make you really unhappy in the
Yeah.
future. Even if like that's something that I have struggled to work through and still struggle to work through, which is like
Mhm.
buying things for myself that will improve my quality of life and
Mhm.
have no negative financial repercussions on me whatsoever in terms of like I can easily afford whatever the thing is,
Mhm.
but because of the way that I was raised in like my childhood, it's so deeply ingrained in my head of like I really should only spend money if I have to.
Right.
Um so those kinds of things. I've also met people who have come from a lot of money and were raised like
Yeah.
very upper class and
Mhm.
um, have a hard time or get frustrated easily and unhappy easily when they cannot pay for convenience or like pay their way out of certain negative situations, which
Right.
is interesting because like being from the flip side, it's like, oh, I'm very comfortable dealing with like, oh, this restaurant is slow, oh, like
Mhm.
I am the last person to get on the plane. Oh, like these sorts of things where I've seen people, from the other position because of the mindsets that they're carrying forward from the way that they were raised and like what they had are also unhappy because they haven't had or done the work to sort of like work their way out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And I think that can, you know, people's life experiences, not necessarily like the mindsets of their parents, can influence it. Like I was reading this, how I sometimes lurk on Reddit and read the am I the asshole threads because they're entertaining. I was just reading one last week that was actually really interesting to me, of this basically this millionaire who's obviously very comfortable with his finances and had plenty of it, more than enough, even after he went through his first divorce. And apparently his first wife was very like financially abusive and just kind of like spent all his money and blew it off, um and didn't appreciate all the money that he was spending on her. And so he was almost like traumatized from that experience. And so in his next relationship, he like went the complete opposite and was like, I refuse to spend any money on my partner, because if I do, then she's a gold digger, and creating this whole story. And so it was almost to the point where she ends up paying for everything. And then it was like kind of the reverse situation, even though he was like living in this mansion, but it's completely like unfurnished, and so she has to like furnish this mansion essentially herself. So it's interesting how that can really impact our mental health and our well-being, and how we kind of perceive our relationships and how we treat other people, and how that relates to happiness. Because it's like there's people that don't realize that they're in this money mindset trap in their head, and they're like, it never feels like enough, when even though they have plenty, they live comfortably, but they're just like in this fear mindset to actually spend it on anything, even like basics like heat, like air conditioning, to live like that kind of comfort level. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you touched on another important piece on more like because we've been talking a lot about the financial side, but like more on the socio side of like the more what like power and position you have really changes the way that you interact with and relate with other people.
Yeah.
And sometimes in a way that is not even noticeable, but like the higher up you are, the I would say it's pretty clear like easier to be happy because you just have more control and influence and like
Right.
for that example, right? Like if you have all the money and ability to like have the place to live and all those things, like you get to dictate the rules for someone else coming into that arrangement,
Right.
which like uh I don't know, being able to have that sort of like power, and I guess it applies to sort of like business relationships as well. Like if you're the boss, you have the ability to sort of like set the rules or like the expectations for the people subordinate to you. And having been on both sides of that to some degree in my life, like I can tell you that it's much easier to be happy when you're the one making the rules or changing the things as opposed to having them enforced upon you.
Yeah. Yeah. It reminds me, I've worked with millionaires as like clients before, and yeah, some of them are actually dealing with like a lot of depression and struggles. And the theme that I see with people with depression, regardless of their social class or economic class, is like what I was hearing from him. One of the ones I was thinking of who was a millionaire but also depressed was that he just felt like not happy in his marriage but trapped in his marriage. And I think there's this like theme of like helplessness, where it's like you don't, even though you have all this wealth and all this power, it's like, but there's still like this sense of helplessness, and I can't break free. It's like if I get a divorce and that's like impacts like other things, it's like I'm too old to find someone new, kind of like that mindset, like, well, then I'll be alone and then that'll not be great kind of thought pattern. So yeah, and I think that can happen in any class, really.
Yeah, that I think that's a good example to highlight sort of what I mentioned before around like I feel like socioeconomic standing definitely has influence in happiness,
Yeah.
but it is not, I don't think it's one of the strongest indicators of happiness. Like I don't think it's one of the most powerful things you can do, right? Like if you're broke and miserable, there are probably things that you can do to work on your happiness faster than just making money or more effectively than making money. I do think it opens up a different class or category of problems typically that people are unhappy with as they tend to become like more wealthy or whatever else. But I don't think that it stops you from getting locked or trapped into the many pitfalls that exist of just like being human that can lead to great amounts of unhappiness. The other thing that's sort of interesting to me is on the lower end, like when you don't have enough money, there could be a lot of struggles around sort of or unhappiness, I guess, around like I'm not able to acquire the things that I need.
Yeah.
And that probably feels a little bit more dire. But I've also seen people in the high net worth side of the spectrum get more and more worried about sort of like managing or allocating or controlling or preserving their wealth. Like they're even having a lot of money doesn't necessarily get you out of the trap of being worried about money all the time, is what I'm trying to get at. Like, even if your standing is completely different, your mindset or the mental traps that you can get stuck in, while they may be a little different flavor, are still present.
Oh yeah, I definitely see that a lot with people with, maybe they're not millionaires, but they definitely have a lot of wealth, and but there's this idea that it's never enough. So they're caught up in like, well, I gotta make more because it's not good enough. And then they like hit that mark and then it's still not enough. And so it's like they're in this constant state of never being satisfied with what they have and appreciating what they have. And I could see that going both ways in like lower class of just not feeling like you have enough. But at the same time, I think things that can, the other factors that I thought of that can impact our sense of happiness is like, do we have like meaningful relationships and connections? Because I think of, some countries are not very well off economically. Like I think Italy is not doing super great economically. Don't quote me on that, but yeah, but their like general satisfaction with life is generally higher than a lot of other countries, because they like family is so important, connection is so important for that. And I could see, yeah, maybe you can definitely have that in upper class, but there's probably plenty of people who are in upper class who don't have that. So it can definitely make the difference.
Yeah, I think that's one of those other factors that's largely independent, is just like how strong is your sense of community and purpose. Because like you said, it's a stereotype at this point of like, oh, this person is so wealthy, but like they have no actual friends or family and no one that they genuinely connect with. And I don't know how true that is in the real world, because I've encountered people of there's just all sorts of all types with or without a community. Um, but I do think that those are much more powerful predictors of happiness. Like you were saying, like you can go to countries where wealth is relatively low, and if social well-being or community like well-being is high, then people are generally happier than they would be otherwise. So I guess that just kind of goes back to, if like you're unhappy and looking for what things you can do to improve your happiness, money might be one of them, but more likely there are other things that are going to have a stronger impact on your life and well-being.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I feel like I'm thinking if I won like the lottery, would it really change my happiness? I think it would maybe bring a temporary surge of happiness, but I don't know if it would really be a ongoing thing. I think like what I've already built or what I've already developed in would still be like the main sources of it, of happiness, and just like giving me more freedom to like work on my own terms and not work is kind of like appealing. But other than that, I'm like, I don't know if it would change a whole lot. What do you think?
I do. Well, this is sort of a tangent, but I will get back to the question you asked, which is I do think that that is one of the things that does change quite a bit as you move up socioeconomically, is your ability to pursue things that are interesting to you without having to worry about the financial consequences, right? There are so many people who I don't want to say have to, because it is like they don't have to, but
Yeah.
they more or less are locked into sort of a certain type of career or job or work that is not necessarily what they want to do or not fulfilling, because it's what they have been able to find or figure out so far to be able to make a living. And I think as you, for example, like if you won the lottery, right? I think it opens up your ability to just pursue the things that are interesting and meaningful to you, which can be a huge contributor and influence on happiness, right? Whereas like the alternative path often is like, yeah, maybe you can get into sort of a field or something close-ish sort of kind of to what you want to do. But it's like what we've talked about before with jobs, like there's always going to be some aspects that are not that pleasant. And I feel like, if you'd won the lottery or had unlimited money or whatever else, you could largely eliminate all those things that you don't want to do and really just focus on the things that are interesting and meaningful to you. So I do think that particular aspect opens up more. But again, there are also things that you can focus on to still like derive purpose from your work, even if it's not 100% exactly what you would be pursuing if you were totally financially free.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Do you have any other thoughts around social class and happiness?
The only thing that I want to just like reiterate is sort of this like money and influence and just having more position and stature doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be happier. You need to really pay attention to the way that you're interacting with those things or the way that you're using those things. And another thing that we didn't quite touch on, but as you move up through those ranks, it can be really easy to fall out of touch with sort of what other people are experiencing. Like if you have power influence over them in some way, it's really, again, it's like a stereotype or a trope of just like, oh, like this person got promoted and now all of a sudden they're like power hungry and they don't pay attention anymore and all those kinds of things. So as we talked about with like relationships and community and purpose and belonging sorts of things being like stronger drivers of happiness, if and as you move up socioeconomically, like it is very valuable for your happiness to pay attention to how your relationships with other people are changing, especially if like people are moving into some sort of subordinate or like dependent situation, to make sure that things are actually going as well as you think they are, because it's very easy and common to sort of be in an illusion and not fully understand once you are in a more powerful position.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Actually, just from my own personal experience, when I was living on the East Coast, I was actually making more money than I am now. And I would say I'm happier now than when I was making more money. Because I didn't actually change my spending behaviors. A lot more money was going towards my student loans. So it wasn't like I was like been a free spender type of person. It was just going towards loans more. So that quality of life hasn't shifted much, but just I feel happier now because I'm in a happier relationship and I'm near my family and I have those connections, and I have more tools to build my happiness. So I think that's the bigger determining factor for at least my own life. All right. Well, I think we covered this topic pretty well. Thank you everyone for tuning in this week. We appreciate you. And if you appreciate us, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and help spread the happiness in the world. We'll see you next time. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like it and then go and subscribe to my channel and ring the bell so you get notified when the next video comes out. If you check out in the description below, go to my website where you can get my free fast and easy guide to stress relief. Thanks again for checking us out, and we'll see you next time.